In this video, we're going to open up Logic for the first time and make sure that Logic is seeing our audio interface and MIDI controller properly. And we're going to take a look at Logic's preferences to set those devices up and also adjust some of the other things for how we're going to work in the program. So let's go ahead and open up the program. We're going to find it here in Applications. You may also see it here in your dock. And if it's not there, you can just drag the icon over and put it in your dock. So let's go ahead and double click on Logic. So the first time you open up the program, you're most likely going to get a little dialog box that's going to ask you if you'd like to download the sound library or download additional content. You can just say yes to this, and what that's going to do, if you're connected to an internet connection, it's going to download all the samples and sounds that come with the program. I think it's around 40 gigs or more. It's going to download in the background. So you can just say okay to this, and I'd recommend doing it so that you have all the sounds that Logic has to offer. So the first time I open up Logic, I may see this dialog box here that says choose a project. For right now, we're going to just close that out. Go up here into the menu and choose preferences. So preferences are for all the global settings of Logic. So once I set the preferences, it's going to be kind of like a once and done thing for any project I open up from here on out. And you can see there's several different options. We're not going to go through all these different categories, but I will touch on some of the more important ones. So let's go into General first, and I'm just going to go through these tabs kind of quickly. So you can see the settings that I have, and a lot of these are the default settings. So next, let's go to the Audio tab and Devices, and make sure that Core Audio is check enabled. And if you're using an audio interface, you're going to want to make sure that your output device and input device say the same thing. So I'm using a Universal Audio Thunderbolt. Yours might say Focusrite Scarlett or Avid MBox, but just make sure they have the same name here. And if you don't have an audio interface, as I said in the last video, not a problem. You can use your onboard computer's speakers or the headphone jack. So that would be output device, and you would say built-in output. An input device, you can also use the built-in microphone on your computer. And any changes in here, you can select Apply Changes. So as you can see, this is a great troubleshooting help for you if you turn on your computer someday to work on Logic and the audio interface isn't working. You can go in here to these settings and preferences and make sure that everything is selected properly. So pressing on to in and out buffer size. So for right now, let's choose somewhere in the middle. I'm going to go with 128. Your numbers may look a little bit different than mine, depending on your audio interface. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a later video. But in and out buffer size is often referred to as latency, and this setting is going to determine how quickly audio or even MIDI information is routed through the computer and Logic Pro. So the smaller the number, the more quickly this happens, which is basically what you want, but the trade-off is that it's going to use more processing power to make that transition happen quickly. So the rule of thumb is that if you're in the recording stages of your project, you're recording your vocals, you're playing your guitar in, you're recording things on your MIDI keyboard, the early stages of your project, the composing stages, let's keep that at a lower number. And in your final stages, when you're mixing, you're changing your EQ and your levels, we can go a higher number for the in and out buffer size. So you can go all the way down to 32 or all the way up to 1024. You can experiment with this a little bit and see how it works for you, but you're going to find that you're going to come back to in and out buffer size maybe a little bit more often than some of these other options and change them within Logic as you're doing different things in the program. In the General tab, for sample accurate automation, we want it to say volume, pan, sends, plugin parameters. And plugin latency compensation, we want this to say all. I'm just going to quickly, again, go through these. And here in MP3, this setting, you can select how compressed of an MP3 file we're going to create when we want to export out of Logic. So we would create an MP3 for a demo purpose or for Planning Center. Let's set this to 128 kilobits per second. Over here in the Display tab, the display is a lot of the aesthetic look of the program, colors of the different windows. the way the control display looks. For display time, hours, minutes, seconds, and milliseconds is what I choose over SMPTE. Display tempo, beats per minute, BPM, mal-zel. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that properly. Just going to go through these quickly. Going to automation. Take a look at that real quick. Again, some of these are the default settings. Advanced, make sure that Show Advanced Tools is selected. During these videos, we're going to be using all of these additional options. Now let's make sure that Logic is seeing our MIDI keyboard controller properly. So if you guys haven't done this already, I would suggest downloading the LCBC Logic Pro templates that we have for you. Take a look in the YouTube description here. I'll give you some links to Dropbox. And these are templates that we can use for building loops for the weekend and things such as that. So if you can, go ahead and download those now. Okay, I've downloaded a couple of the templates. And for this, let's open up Reference Track Controller and Click Track Template, which is the more bare bones of our templates. Let's go to Window and open MIDI Environment. So the MIDI environment is some of the more advanced MIDI connections that are within Logic. Let's go to Layer, click Imports, and this is what we're looking for right here. So our physical input shows us all the MIDI keyboard controllers, MIDI drum machines, MIDI interfaces, anything in the MIDI world that's outside the computer, that's connected to the computer, we should see here in physical input. What we want to make sure is that we're seeing it, and also we want to make sure that it is connected to this here sequencer input. So if these aren't connected, then you're not going to be able to record information onto a software instrument track. There may be a few other things here in this chain, and that's okay. Maybe you have an older template. Maybe you're seeing a little keyboard there from one of the Logic templates. Either way, just to make sure that you have your connection going to sequencer input. Right now, this says sum, which is basically the accumulation of all the MIDI information from all the devices at once going to sequencer input. So you can select that, or you could choose the individual ones. And this is one of my pet peeves of Logic. I wish they would change this thing because it's so hard to read. So Apple, if you're listening, please change this. But either way, this is a great troubleshooting tool as well. If you're not seeing MIDI information going into Logic properly. Here I have a monitor, and this monitor is going to be helpful for me to see some of the technical MIDI data that's going into the computer as I play notes here on my MIDI keyboard controller. It's going to show me the MIDI channel, the MIDI note, and the velocity. And that can be helpful, let's say if you're using like a MIDI drum pad, which doesn't show you the actual MIDI notes on the drum pad. As you play those drum pads in, it will show you what MIDI note that's assigned to. Well, thanks for watching, guys, and on to the next video.